Hello, everyone. This is Manuel Barrantes,
And I'm Brandon Carey.
and we're here to discuss Brandon's recent article, The Polarization Paradox, published in Episteme last year.
So the classical dogmatism paradox, the paradox that starts with a really simple assumption that you know something and then derives this really strong dogmatic conclusion. So take something you think you know. Suppose I'm sitting in my office, I look out the window, I see water falling from the sky, and on that basis, I know that it's raining. Right, well, then I can think, I know that it's raining. I know that's a true proposition. So any evidence against that proposition is misleading in the sense that it's evidence against something that's true. So any evidence that it's not raining is misleading evidence. And if I want to believe what's true, it seems like I should ignore misleading evidence. I should disregard it, not take it as a reason to change my beliefs. But then once I've done that, it seems like any evidence I get in the future that it's not raining, I should just dismiss, right? I should hang on to my belief no matter what counter evidence comes my way, which is a pretty worrying conclusion because then it's like there's no reason to ever change my belief. So the solution to that paradox addresses the paradox by saying, well, actually, when you get some evidence against that proposition, it changes what you know. It defeats the justification that you originally had for that proposition. So maybe you come in my office and you say, hey, it's actually not raining outside. They're spraying off the roof, and that's why there's water falling past your window. Right? The moment you say that to me, my justification for believing that it's raining outside is already defeated. So I no longer get to use that proposition in my argument that I should disregard what you've told me about them spraying off the roof, right? So the idea is when you get new evidence, when you are forced to encounter it, it changes what you know so that you no longer have the first premise in the argument that generates the paradox. Yeah, good. So the new paradox, which I call the polarization paradox, only occurs for a special kind of subject, a person with a special kind of evidence. And I call those people evidentially polarized subjects. What it means to be evidentially polarized is that it's reasonable for you to believe some claim, whatever it is, and it's also reasonable for you to believe that any source that offers evidence against that claim is an untrustworthy source, at least about that specific claim. And so if you're rational in believing both of those things, like your evidence supports both of those claims at the same time, then you get in a situation where you can again argue that this kind of dogmatism is rational. Because any source you encounter that says, hey, you're actually wrong about P, whatever P is, right? Well, you're reasonable in believing that any source like that is an untrustworthy source. And once you have reason to believe that they're an untrustworthy source, it seems like it makes sense to disregard the evidence they offer you, at least in the sense that you shouldn't take their saying P is false as a reason to think that P is false. But once you have a reason to think this source is untrustworthy about this claim, using that source's testimony as a reason to doubt that claim seems like an irrational move. I think the first thing to say is that it just seems like there are cases where it's rational to distrust sources just because they offer evidence against a particular claim. An example I used in the paper is like flat earthers. I have really good evidence from sources I trust, experts in the field, right, that the earth is not flat. I also have this other evidence that there are a bunch of people spreading misinformation about the shape of the earth for any number of reasons, right? So I know there are people out there basically trying to fool me into thinking that the earth is flat. So, given that additional evidence, that's the evidence that makes me polarized on this subject. Given that additional evidence, when I see like a YouTube thumbnail that says the earth is flat for real, I take that as no evidence at all that the earth is flat because I feel like I have this built in reason to dismiss what would otherwise be evidence for me about the shape of the earth, right? The mechanisms that make evidential polarization happen don't depend on the content of the proposition or like what the specific topic is. What makes the mechanisms work, it's just about I have reasons to think that there are sources who are trying to mislead me about this proposition. I know that they will offer seemingly compelling evidence against my belief, right? But I have reason to think that those sources are untrustworthy for one reason or another. And that holds in politics just as well as it holds in the case of planet shapes, I guess.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you, Random, and I hope everybody watching like this conversation. Bye bye.